Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving deep into Surah Al-Kawthar. It's a short but super powerful chapter in the Quran.
Definitely powerful.
And it was revealed in Makkah during a time when the Prophet Muhammad was facing a lot of hardship personally, but also just in terms of his mission.
Yeah.
And it's just 3 verses, but it covers some really big topics.
It does.
Like grief and prophecy and the enduring legacy of faith.
Oh, yeah, that's right. What's fascinating to me here is how this surah, even in its brevity, manages to be incredibly potent. It addresses a very specific situation, the mockery the prophet faced after the loss of his sons, and turns it into this message of universal hope and resilience.
Okay, let's unpack this. You mentioned mockery. So what exactly were the prophet's enemies saying? Like, why was this such a painful attack?
Well, they use the word abtar to taunt him. Now, abtar, that word implies being cut off, without progeny or legacy. And so in the context of that society, it meant the end of his lineage and by extension, the end of his message. So imagine the sting of that, especially after suffering such a personal loss.
It's almost unimaginable using someone's grief as a weapon like that. So how does Surah Al-Kawthar respond to this attack?
Well, it starts with a powerful declaration. Indeed, we have granted you, Al-Kawthar. Right from the beginning, it shifts the focus from lack to abundance, from despair to hope.
But what is Al-Kawthar?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Al-Kawthar has multiple interpretations. On a more literal level, the prophet himself described it as a river in paradise,
Okay.
with banks of pearls and rubies.
Wow.
Its water is whiter than milk, flowing straighter than an arrow.
Wow. Talk about a vivid image. I can almost picture it.
Right. It goes deeper than that. It's not just a pretty river.
Right.
We also have Imam al-Sadiq's interpretation of Al-Kawthar as a river in paradise given to the prophet in compensation for the loss of his son.
So even in immense grief, there's this promise of abundant goodness overflowing in paradise.
Precisely. And then there's the interpretation of Al-Kawthar as representing prophethood itself, the wisdom of the Quran, the ever-growing community of believers.
Okay.
It can also refer to abundance in the prophet's followers and supporters.
Okay.
It even encompasses the multitude of his descendants.
So Al-Kawthar is this multifaceted concept that encompasses both material and spiritual blessings.
Exactly. And if we look at the context of that insult, abtar, the interpretation of Al-Kawthar as referring to Fatima, the prophet's daughter, becomes particularly important.
You're right. This interpretation really flips the script on that whole cut-off accusation.
It certainly does. It counters the idea that the prophet was cut off because he had no sons to carry on his name.
Right.
So in a society obsessed with male heirs, this insult would have hit hard.
Yeah, for sure.
But Fatima, though a daughter, became instrumental in continuing the prophet's lineage, right?
Absolutely.
Her descendants included 12 imams and countless scholars who carried on the prophet's legacy, making significant contributions to Islam.
Wow.
The renowned Sunni scholar, Fakhr al-Razi, even acknowledged the vast and influential progeny of the prophet through Fatima.
So Al-Kawthar becomes this symbol of a thriving lineage that defies those who tried to diminish the prophet.
And it underscores that true legacy is not just about bloodlines,
Right.
but about the continuation of knowledge, faith, and good deeds.
It's almost like saying, you thought I was cut off. Well, look at this flourishing tree of knowledge and faith that has sprung from my roots.
Exactly. It challenges us to think about what truly matters when it comes to leaving a mark on the world.
Right.
Is it worldly power or something more enduring?
That is a question worth pondering. But before we get too philosophical, the second verse of the surah brings us back to the present moment.
Yeah.
So pray to your Lord and sacrifice.
Yes, and this is fascinating because it links the idea of abundance to a call to action.
Okay.
We are reminded that receiving such blessings demands gratitude, and that gratitude needs to be expressed, not just felt.
And what about the word sacrifice?
Yeah.
I imagine that has deeper meanings too.
You're right. It's not just about the literal act. The word used here, nar, can refer to slaughtering camels during Eid al-Adha.
Okay.
But it also connects to raising hands during prayer, facing the Qibla, and the very act of prayer itself.
So it's not just grand gestures, but consistent acts of devotion.
Precisely. It's about aligning yourself with something greater than yourself.
Which brings to mind a story about the prophet asking the angel Gabriel about the meaning of nar.
Yes. And Gabriel explained that it encompasses the act of prayer itself. Both angels and humans raise their hands in supplication.
Right.
Which speaks to the universality of this gesture, this outward expression of devotion.
And Imam al-Sadiq even demonstrated this, raising his hands and explaining that's what the verse signifies. So the second verse is this beautiful reminder that blessings are meant to be acknowledged and appreciated through action, and a deepening of our connection with the divine.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something we can all relate to regardless of our background.
Absolutely. And then the surah shifts gears again with that final, powerful declaration.
Okay.
Indeed, your enemy is the one cut off.
That's quite a statement, especially after that initial insult about the prophet being cut off.
It is. It's like this powerful wave that builds and crashes, leaving no doubt about who has the ultimate victory.
Yeah.
It highlights the irony. Those who mocked the prophet are ultimately the ones who have faded away, while his message and descendants thrive.
It's like that old saying, what goes around comes around,
Yep.
but on a cosmic scale.
Exactly. It really prompts us to think about what defines a lasting impact.
Well, in that case, I'm eager to hear what you make of this final verse and its significance.
Let's dive into that next.
Okay.
So this final verse, indeed your enemy is the one cut off. It's full of irony, right? The very thing they try to use against the prophet becomes their undoing. But it also highlights that enduring nature of truth.
Yeah, I could see that. Those who tried to cut off the prophet's influence's message, they ultimately failed. It really does make you ponder what truly endures in the face of opposition.
It certainly does. And it's interesting, this verse uses the word shanika for enemy.
Hmm.
It's not just any opponent. It suggests a deep-seated hatred,
Good.
a real malice that goes beyond simple disagreement.
So it's emphasizing the intensity of the opposition the prophet faced and how that same intensity ultimately backfired. That's powerful stuff.
It is.
And that brings to mind something you mentioned earlier about Imam al-Sadiq's various interpretations of Al-Kawthar.
Yes, Imam al-Sadiq offered several insightful interpretations.
Right.
As we discussed, he viewed Al-Kawthar as a river in paradise bestowed upon the prophet as compensation for the loss of his son. He also interpreted Al-Kawthar as signifying the prophet's intercession and the abundance of his followers, further solidifying the surah's message of enduring legacy and divine favor.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It really enriches our understanding of this surah.
It certainly does.
But we've been dissecting this surah from a scholarly perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What about the average listener? How can they connect with this powerful message on a personal level?
That's a great question. And I think it's time we shifted gears a bit and explored how Surah Al-Kawthar speaks to us today in our modern world.
So we've explored the historical context, the linguistic nuances, even different interpretations of Al-Kawthar. But what does this all mean for our listeners today in their, everyday lives?
That's the key question, right? It's bridging that gap between the ancient wisdom and modern relevance. How do we apply these timeless insights to the challenges we face in our world?
Because sometimes life can feel like a barrage of negativity. We're bombarded with bad news, social pressures, maybe even personal struggles. It's easy to feel overwhelmed, like we're being, like you said, cut off from hope, from abundance, from our own potential.
And that's where the resilience of Surah Al-Kawthar is so powerful. This surah was revealed when the prophet himself was facing intense opposition, even personal loss.
You're right. And yet, amidst all that darkness, there's this unwavering affirmation of divine support, this promise of overflowing abundance.
It's like that beacon of light cutting through the fog, reminding us to keep going, to keep believing in the power of good, to overcome, even the toughest challenges.
It's almost like saying, don't let the noise of the world drown out that inner voice. You are not defined by your circumstances, but by your capacity for growth, for connection, for creating a legacy of goodness.
And that idea of legacy, remember how it's woven into the surah through Al-Kawthar as referring to Fatima?
Yes. She carried on the prophet's lineage not just through bloodlines, but through knowledge, faith, good deeds, a spiritual lineage.
Exactly. And this resonates with that human need to connect to something larger than ourselves, to contribute to a story that extends beyond our lifespan, right? It's recognizing that we're all part of this intricate web, and our actions, no matter how small, have a ripple effect that goes beyond what we can imagine.
This is making me think about the concept of time and how Surah Al-Kawthar seems to transcend it. We're talking about events that unfolded after the surah's revelation, prophecies that came true over time.
That's a really insightful observation. Surah Al-Kawthar, in its concise form, manages to encompass both the immediate context of the prophet's struggles and a vision that stretches far into the future.
It's almost like a bridge between the past, present, and future, connecting us to a timeless message of hope and resilience.
And it reminds us that even when we're facing difficulties in our own lives, there's a larger plan at play, a divine tapestry being woven over time.
So if we were to distill the essence of Surah Al-Kawthar, what would you say are the key takeaways for our listener today?
I think it boils down to this: trust in Allah's plan even amidst adversity. embrace the power of sacrifice, not just in a ritualistic sense, but in terms of surrendering our ego and desires to a higher purpose. And remember that true abundance lies not in material possessions, but in aligning ourselves with the divine will and contributing to a legacy of good that extends far beyond our limited lifespan.
Beautifully said. Surah Al-Kawthar, in its profound simplicity, offers a roadmap for navigating life's challenges and finding solace in the face of hardship. It's a reminder that even when we feel cut off or alone, we're connected to a source of infinite goodness, and that our true legacy lies in aligning ourselves with that source. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you leave feeling inspired and empowered to seek the abundant good that's always available to us.